Hello and welcome to the Rover podcast, the podcast by the Rover, Quebec's #1 independent journalism news website.
Many people would dispute that.
But you know what? It's completely reader supported. And so if you are interested in supporting us, go to the rover.ca/support-us. That's rover.ca/support-us. I said it right the first time.
You did.
It's links in bio. Please check it out. Today we have Amira on with us. Amira, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much, Isaac. Great to see you and Chris as well.
So just to summarize, Amira Elghawaby is, you're a former journalist. You were a columnist at the Toronto Star. You wrote columns for the Toronto Star. And now you have been appointed by Justin Trudeau to fight Islamophobia across Canada. Is that fairly summarized?
That's
it.
The whole thing.
Very small job, very easy, just straightforward.
Yeah.
Just end racism.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah,
it would be very nice.
Well, we don't have a ton of time with Amira today, so we're just going to jump right into it. I would like to just quickly address something because I know that YouTube comments are going to get out of control so fast. Can we talk about the difference between being anti-Semitic and pro-Muslim?
Well, the sort of like the way that we conflate anti-Semitism with opposition to the war or
right.
The occupation. Do you want to maybe unpack that for us?
Well, I mean, I think what just has to be clear whenever we're talking about any form of racism or hate, that in a democracy, we want to have the freedom to criticize government policies, whatever government that is.
Yeah.
Criticizing the Canadian government does not make you un-Canadian. Criticizing the Saudi Arabian government does not make you Islamophobic, just as criticizing the government of Israel does not make you anti-Semitic. What we talk about when we're talking about hate, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, etc., is when you are attacking a community, individuals, for their identities. You are stereotyping them, you are discriminating or creating barriers against their success and contributions to society. So that is the distinction.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I think that you have people who, in good faith, will see a chant or something at a protest, a pro-Palestinian rally that troubles them, and they'll have an honest reaction to it. And I don't think we should ever minimize people's feelings. It's important that we acknowledge that and that we hear them out and that we have that conversation. But I also think that many kind of more fringe politicians in Israel have so closely linked the Israeli government and the Israeli army to the Jewish identity that often there's this kind of conflation that happens, when in fact, like, I think a lot of the criticism, specifically in Canada, is rooted in the fact that, well, we provide aid to this government, that we are participating in this war, whether we like it or not. So it gives us an extra onus and an extra kind of duty to watch, to be watchful about it, in the same way that, like, a lot of people criticized Canada selling armored vehicles to Saudi Arabia. Like, it doesn't mean that, we hate Muslims. It just means that we need to be extra careful of what we do on the international stage and how the technology that we sell or give or donate or whatever to another country is used. And anyways, that's how I'm unpacking that way right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Could you, Amira, I'm really interested in hearing, I think for a lot of our audience, myself included, maybe we don't have a full comprehension of why women who are Muslim wear hijabs. I was wondering if you would be able to explain that to us, and like whether it's a choice, like if it's like a part of the religion. Like, could you unpack it a little bit for us so we can have a greater understanding of why hijabs are worn?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Isaac, thanks for that question. And before I get to it, just to say to you, Chris, the role that I was appointed at is to provide advice and guidance to the federal government on how its policies impact Muslim communities in Canada. And so throughout, the past 7 months in particular, where we have seen a very disturbing rise in Islamophobia and in anti-Semitism, that the ways that our communities are experiencing that have helped to inform the advice that I'm providing to the government, because that's really key here. Canadians of all backgrounds, and particularly while we know that what's happening in Gaza and in Israel is not a religious conflict, it is not a religious conflict. It's actually a territorial, political
Yeah.
conflict. However, the way that it's manifesting in our communities is harming us. It's challenging what it means for our Canadian values of inclusion and equity. And so the advice that I'm trying to provide is to allow the government to understand how those policies are playing out, how they are impacting particularly Canadian Muslims of Palestinian descent. And so that the government needs to be mindful of all those various concerns of which you touched upon right there, Chris. So just wanted
Yeah.
to clear that up because
That's really good
yeah,
clarification.
because my role is, again, it's domestic in the sense
Yeah.
it's how are the policies impacting us here at home. I don't have that international mandate then to provide advice on how Muslims abroad are being also facing persecution, oppression, etc. So just for that clarity. And then to your point, Isaac, and your good question, I really appreciate it because part of the mandate as well is around raising awareness and providing education to counter the stereotypes and misinformation that exist about Muslim communities. And of course, I say the word communities very deliberately first because our communities are not a monolith. There is no,
Of course.
archetypal Muslim. There's such a diversity of views and practices within our communities. And when it comes to your question related to the hijab, when I'm wearing a headscarf, this is a choice. It should always be a choice, despite the fact that we do know in certain parts of the world there is coercion with wearing the hijab. And just as we would condemn the coercion, the forcing of anyone to be forced to wear the hijab, we also condemn the coercion to force anyone not to wear the hijab. That just as any other choice, personal choice, it has to be up to the individual to decide how, if they are practicing Muslims, how they want to show and display that. So for women, it is a very personal choice, and it is. For me, for example, it was a decision I made throughout when I was in university about 20 odd years ago, Carleton, where I was studying journalism. And I personally made that decision out of a commitment to spirituality. It was a way that I wanted to practice my faith. And, in fact, people are often surprised. And Chris, you'll remember this from my lecture at McGill University a few months back. It was my father who was most worried about me wearing the hijab, contrary to this idea and this stereotypical notion that Muslim men are telling their wives and daughters, cover up, don't do this, don't do that. On the contrary, my father worried about the discrimination I faced and tried to convince me not to wear it.
Wow.
But I had told him, you know what, for me, it's actually, it comes out of my feminist ideals that I want to be judged not for how I look, but how I present myself, how I treat others. And I want to step out of the beauty myth, for example. That was my personal decision.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Ask any Muslim women, and guaranteed you'll have different reasons. Oftentimes, it is also based on the fact that women who cover, they feel that it is part of their faith practice to do so. So that is a bit of a unpacking of that, and so it is really important that we have exactly these kinds of conversations, because a lot of times, if I could get a nickel for every time someone tweets at me a video of some man somewhere, Muslim man mistreating a Muslim woman and saying, this is your religion, how do you explain this? I mean, it is so Islamophobic because, unfortunately, misogyny exists in every single culture and tradition and country in the world, and we should all be opposed to misogyny.
Absolutely.
And it's antithetical to our faith, just as it's antithetical to most worldviews and world religions. And I mean, I honestly think that, especially in the era of social media right now, I think that going back to the local and the local relationships that we can build together, like getting to know each other in your own communities, I think in a way it's one of the key antidotes to the rise in polarization, to the rise in hate, to the rise in what we're seeing on the daily basis, where, as you said, Chris, and Isaac too, with the questions that you pose, it's that you're not hearing it directly from people who are living these experiences. And at the end of the day, our shared values as humans, we got to lean into that idea of humanity, that everybody essentially wants the same thing: to live in safety, to be okay, to be able to do what they love and contribute to society in some way. That's fundamentally what people want.
Yeah.
And if only we could just encourage each other to do that versus getting into, being pulled into hating and the in group and the out group and looking for scapegoats for why your life may not be going the way you want it. That's an old political trick of trying to divide community. And when community come together across shared values of what it means to be a member of Canadian society and a member of the human family, I think it goes a really long way in creating that environment that we want for ourselves and our families.
When I heard you speak at McGill, you spoke about the sort of the two existences, or like the two eras of being Muslim in Canada. There's before 9/11 and there's after 9/11. And I feel like we're seeing some of that kind of post 9/11 intensity right now since October 7th, which was terrible, and I condemn it, and we all should. But I'm wondering if you could explain, what was it like growing? Your parents came from Egypt, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, so I actually did a TED Talk about this as well, where I shared, just as I did at McGill University, about when I was growing up, being Muslim was never something that I felt would be like a detriment. Like I never thought it would be, it was just one more aspect of who I was. I was Egyptian, I was Muslim, I was a girl, I was,
What were some things that you were like really into as a kid?
Oh my God, like Cabbage Patch dolls, although I resisted it first, but then, the wave got me. Popples, like, Care Bears. I recently got a cheer Care Bear because I need it. I'm regressing a little, needing some childhood nostalgia to just get me through.
That's so relatable.
Get me through life. But yeah, like it was just such a, it was such a wonderful, I feel very privileged. I had a wonderful experience growing up here in Ottawa. I talk about, in elementary school, our school principal, saw that out of a student body, probably about 150 kids, there were like 5 Muslim kids. And so he said to us, we're in the 4th grade, do you want to do a presentation at a school assembly about Islam, And I was like, cool, right? Like, that's neat. And of course, I knew very little, but I was like, I'm going to become an expert here. And we did this cute presentation. And as I went through my education, I was often made to feel that the things that made all of us as young people different were things to share, things to celebrate, things to be able to feel positive about. And so that's kind of how, and I call it, did I drink the multiculturalism Kool-Aid, right? Did I, I didn't know about a lot of for example, the situation and the realities of Indigenous communities in Canada. We weren't taught that stuff back then, right? And it's nice that you said the 90s, but elementary school was the 80s for me. And
I was in the 90s. That's all.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. They're so close. So I really did have, I would also say, like kind of rose-colored glasses about my place in Canadian society. And then 9/11 happened, and I had just started wearing the hijab a few months before that.
Wow.
Oh, God.
So when my dad had said to me, I don't think you should wear it, it was before 9/11. Because he was like, because he immigrated to Canada. He came here. He left his entire family in Egypt looking for a better future for his kids. He wanted to give us every advantage he could.
What did he do in Egypt?
He studied engineering, and he came and he would have he worked 30 years at Transport Canada in airplane certification. So he made sure that all of our airplanes were safe for all of us, and he did so much for our family. And so he didn't understand, why would you put something on that now will kind of put you a little bit further behind your peers and may be a reason people don't bring you into spaces professionally or socially or whatnot. And I couldn't get it. I said to him, are you kidding me? Like, this is Canada. Like, I had drank that Kool-Aid, and I said, if I can't wear a hijab in Canada and succeed, there's nowhere else I can do it. Like, it just can't happen, because this is a pluralistic country that needs all of us. So 9/11 happened, and that's it. That was like, what? And all of a sudden, we had that moment where, we're looked at differently. So, and it's not just young women like myself who's wearing the hijab. Like, I have since, especially in this role, I have been traveling throughout the country, and I have met with people who are working in the government, in professional organizations, who are now much older. and they were not visibly Muslim, for example, but their peers and their colleagues knew they were Muslim, and they suddenly were treated so differently and so negatively that it still brings tears, and I'm serious, tears to the elders that I've spoken to about how they were made to feel in the months and years after 9/11, that suddenly they were viewed as, and these are professionals, these are
Yeah.
people who've achieved a lot. And now when you said that, Chris, about it feels like we're kind of in a moment like post 9/11 moment. Absolutely. Exactly. What people can visit my website to see the statements that I put out in this role. They can also, by the way, sign up to a newsletter to get updates. Our first newsletter is going to be rolled out very soon.
We're going to
But
include that in the, we'll include that, a link to it in the chat.
yeah, please do that. And so what we heard from people, and I was just reviewing some of the conversations we've had with young people, is after the horrific attacks of October 7th and what happened after that until today, and the ongoing violence and war on Gaza, all of a sudden, young Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians who similarly had perhaps rose-colored glasses about their place in Canadian society, all of a sudden are being questioned if they wear a keffiyeh, are being questioned or excluded for talking about Palestinian human rights, or are being looked at differently, and being made to feel like second-class citizens in their own country, and all of a sudden don't know if they can belong in the same way. And because we add the layer of social media, which we didn't have post 9/11 the way we do today, the alienation and the sense of despair and worry about democracy is really high amongst our young people, because they're seeing a disconnect. They're seeing a disconnect between commitments to human rights and civil liberties, and then they're seeing that yes, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the way that it was promised. And so I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned about that. And I think the advice I've been giving to the federal government is really to continue to stand for civil liberties, to stand against hate against anyone, to condemn, of course, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Arab racism. All of these are very present. And we're seeing, again, the rise in very dangerous rhetoric, but also assaults, vandalism. The number of women that I've met with who have been spat on, who are visibly Muslim, are numerous.
Jesus.
The reports of vandalism here in Ottawa, a local mosque, someone came in, smeared feces all over the windows. Another woman in, I think it was Scarborough, her phone was stolen from her. She was assaulted, and she was treated in a horrific way just because she was visibly Muslim. So all of this is, this is just a few cases, but a 1,000% increase in Islamophobic incidents since October 7th in the first few months alone.
1,000%.
1,000% according to the National Council of Canadian Muslims that are
absurd.
documenting.
That is such a high number. Holy crap.
What really troubles me is that when we take this space away, when we don't allow people to grieve, because that's like a lot of people in the community are grieving.
That's right.
Either because they personally know someone in Gaza, and by now, so many people have died, or they know somebody in Israel who lost their lives, and they're sucked into this big political debate that's very dehumanizing. And I don't hear a lot about that in the media, and I don't read a lot about it, and I don't see a lot of that discourse on social media, which is how do we calm it down, and how do we bring everybody back into the fold? Otherwise, this division never goes to a good place. And this automatic assumption that, there have been prominent columnists who said we should consider the Palestinian flag a hate symbol. Tristan Hopper wrote that in the National Post. Maybe this is a kind of a good segue to the thing we can't not address. I'm sorry. Your nomination was controversial in Quebec to the job you have now because of some comments that you made.
Look, I mean, I think at the core, anyone who signs up for jobs like this, I applied for this position, and the reason I applied for it is because I really believe in Canadian values of inclusion, of equity. I think Canada despite all the work we need to do on reconciliation with our Indigenous, Métis, Inuit communities, I think, that's so fundamental also, by the way. Like, we need to do that reconciliation work because we need to ensure that the foundation of our country is based on something strong. And so, our experiences there have been a blight on our country's success, right? We all want, as I said, to live in inclusive communities. And so I signed up for this role because my track record speaks for itself. I have been unequivocal throughout my entire human rights and journalism career in condemning all forms of hate, all forms of racism. I've been an advocate for my communities. Why? Because anytime any community is treated less than, where there's second-class citizenship, where everybody has these rights, but this group over here, they don't have those same rights. Why? Well, because it means something's wrong with this group, or they don't deserve to have the same rights as everyone else. That's dangerous to democracy. That is dangerous to all Canadians. That's harmful for the future we need for our country. So when I signed up for this role, I understood that some of my past advocacy, of course, is going to be viewed within a particular lens. And I was very clear. I apologized for how the remarks and the comments and my writings had been interpreted. And I actually explained that we always have to be mindful about how we articulate our human rights issues. And I will continue to call out discriminatory practices for our communities. Why? Because that strengthens Canada as a whole. It strengthens us. It speaks to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It speaks to the human rights codes of every province, which, by the way, Quebec was the first province to have a human rights code before even the Charter. So we really have an opportunity in Canada to demonstrate what it means to live in a pluralistic society where everyone can succeed. And so, will there be pushback to that? There are those who don't benefit from a unified society, who build upon division, who don't mind polarization, who don't really have the best interests of all Canadians at heart. And I think the collective, the majority, just as we saw after the Quebec City mosque attack, just after we saw after the London family attack, and all these, sadly, Canada has that distinction, a very dubious one, of having the highest number of deadly attacks against Muslims of any other G7 country. That's not what Canada should ever represent. That's not what I want young Muslim kids to think about when they think about Canada. I want our kids to think about what all other kids feel and should feel, that they're included, that they belong, that they can succeed, and they can help build a society that belongs to all of us, where we all can share in our mutual strengths. So
regardless of gender identity, religion.
Regardless of our identities, like, it's a place where we want to center our human rights together. And so it's a lot easier said than done. But again, this, why would I take the time out of a super, like, there's just so much going on, but I wanted to sit down with you, Chris, and I'm so happy to meet you, Isaac, as well, because the work that you are doing just in a podcast like this creates a space for the kinds of conversations we need so much more of. And it's something, by the way, that, my counterpart, Deborah Lyons, who's the special envoy on anti-Semitism and Holocaust remembrance, her and I met last summer and we had these conversations. We said, what do we want in these roles? Well, we want to demonstrate the strength and beauty of Canada as a place where we're going to learn from our mistakes and we're going to keep getting better, so that we're all collectively getting better and stronger. So it sounds kind of, like kumbaya. I get it.
Yeah.
It's not so easy, but we need to create these spaces, these conversations, and build our relationships.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my understanding real quickly is that, you had, I think you had seen a tweet or a statement where Quebecers compared themselves to Indigenous people, and there was a conflation there. But you later sort of clarified it and said, look, I know that there has been extremely unfair treatment of Quebec within Canada.
Sure.
I know that French Canadians within Quebec were treated as second-class citizens for a long time. You've acknowledged this. I think a lot of people don't realize that. And I think often, a person cannot be summarized by one tweet or one statement. And if we don't have this ability to give each other grace and to sit down with people, especially people we don't agree with, then, what is this whole democracy thing about? I see a very casual form of racism and xenophobia emerging. The mayor of Hampstead just tweeted that there should no longer be no immigration from, or no refugees to come here from Gaza because their values don't align with ours. That scares me, because then we get into this, this whole thing of like, well, we don't want to be replaced by Muslims, and this scary far right European dialogue.
That is why I'm here. Like, I'm here to hear that because I need it. I think we all need to hear these positive voices in our lives. So Chris and Isaac, like, thank you for being that for me right now and in this moment, and for your audience, for your listeners. I think you are doing a service to Canadians, because again, especially now, especially where people are getting their information and misinformation from all sorts of places. I hope people tune in to you and to the work you're doing at the Rover is phenomenal. It's great. And I know that I really appreciate it. And as we know, journalism, I feel like I'm always a journalist at heart. I love journalism. I believe
it's
in
a disease.
So
you never
much.
lose it.
Absolutely. It's such an important calling. And I'm so inspired by people like you both who are still in the trenches of journalism, because it is such an important aspect of what makes a democracy thrive and survive. So big thanks to you both. Thanks for giving me your time, and for your listeners and viewers for their time too.
All right. So we're picking up after speaking to Amira. And we wanted to talk a little bit about, she only had a half hour to give to us today, which is super cool. But we wanted to talk about the thing that is going on right now in Montreal, the encampments at McGill. Take it away, Chris.
All right, so probably the biggest story in Montreal, and one of the biggest stories in Canada right now, is that McGill University, the students at McGill University have joined the protest movement we're seeing across North America, along with students from Concordia, Université de Québec à Montréal, and Université de Montréal. They are camping on the front lawn near the Roddick Gates at McGill University. They're not blocking passages. There's been no violence on site. Peaceful. But some of the chants that the protesters have been using have been called anti-Semitic by certain students who have tried to get an injunction against a court order for the encampment to be dismantled, so that the police can come in and dismantle the camp.
So first things first, why are they being called anti-Semitic? And second, what's an injunction?
Yes, two very good things here. All right, so there have been incidents where people heard anti-Semitic remarks when they were passing by the encampment. What I've heard from people there is that some people came by the encampment and started yelling nonsense, and they were kicked out.
Okay.
And that might be the incident that some people are referring to.
Yeah. But
then there are these chants. And one of the chants is the only solution is Intifada revolution. Now, some people say that's anti-Semitic because they believe it refers to the second Palestinian uprising, the Intifada, wherein people used suicide bombs and terrorist tactics against Israeli civilians. And they believe that calling for an intifada, as people are at McGill, is calling on this specific kind of violence. When you speak to somebody from Independent Jewish Voices who are present on campus, or some of the Palestinian organizers, or some of the people on the ground, they will tell you that intifada is an Arabic word that means uprising. And if it were English and we were saying revolution, people wouldn't say, do you mean this revolution or that revolution? It's a super broad word. So what I have been told by these people, by people on the ground, is that when we say intifada, we are talking about resistance, not taking up arms against the government. We're talking about resistance against the Israeli government that could involve Jewish and Muslim people inside the borders of Israel, and that it is essentially, in some cases it refers to the first intifada, which was in the early 90s, late 80s, when the Palestinians were protesting against illegal settlements in Israel, and a lot of this just involved throwing rocks at tanks and direct action, but either non-violent direct action or rocks and Molotov cocktails. I'm not saying this is perfect, but there is some nuance here. And everybody I spoke to explicitly said, no, we do not want violence, and we do not want to rise up against Jews. It's a political conflict, and there are many ways to resist, and to assume automatically that resistance means killing your neighbors and murdering people because of their religion is jumping to conclusions.
Quite an assumption.
Now, the Superior Court has heard arguments from a lawyer representing some McGill students who feel threatened by the encampments, and the judge Chantal Massé said that the arguments made aren't strong enough to justify ordering the police to come and shut down a nonviolent protest.
Gotcha.
They don't. The court doesn't believe that what was given to them in evidence meets that threshold. So that's where we're at now. If you want, the dean of McGill, Dr. Deep Sanai, wrote an email. It's Wednesday afternoon. Just wrote an email to his students after the failure of the injunction. Dear members of the McGill community, I am writing to update you as we work to resolve the situation on the field on Lower Campus. The heartbreaking situation in the Middle East that has led to the McGill encampment on McGill campus is complex. I recognize the diversity of positions on the subject and the need for these perspectives to be heard. I recognize the pain people on all sides are feeling and the human suffering caused by these events. I hear it in the conversations I have with people from McGill and outside, and it deeply pains me. I would like nothing better than peace to prevail. Everyone has a right to protest and express their views in an appropriate manner and place. I support the right of all members of McGill community to do so on our campus in ways that respect the law and McGill's policies and procedures. However, no one, let alone individuals from outside McGill, has the right to set up an encampment on the university's property, including the grounds. By their own declaration, through explicit signs, the current encampment includes a variety of groups with no association with McGill. This cannot be accepted and will not be allowed. Therefore, the encampment must be dismantled quickly, and this is non-negotiable. We have reached out again to the lawyers retained by some members of the McGill community to try to restart our discussions as we continue to collaborate with police. I felt it was important to let McGillians as a whole know the proposal we had offered them. If members of the McGill community and the encampment permanently leave the encampment immediately, I commit to holding a forum with members of the McGill community to discuss your various demands and any contrary views in a peaceful, respectful, and civilized manner. Our discussions today will be only with McGill community members. To those not affiliated with McGill, let me reiterate that you must leave McGill property immediately. As we navigate this difficult situation, our goals are to ensure the health and safety of our community and maintain a safe, respectful, and inclusive campus environment that prioritizes our mission of teaching, learning, and research. Sincerely, Deep Sinai, President and Vice Chancellor, McGill University.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Everyone supports protest until it's on your doorstep, I guess.
Yeah, I mean...
But I just want to say this to the keyboard warriors who are currently in our YouTube comments.
Oh, no.
Who are super pro Freedom Convoy. This is so much less bothersome. So much less. They're not in front of the dorms, not in front of classes. They're literally off to the side in a camp, being kind of quiet. It's not even rowdy. So before you say something, remember how hypocritical it would be to support the convoys and not support this. I know you might not agree with the cause. It's okay not to agree with the cause. That's your right, but it is their right to protest, and protests have to disrupt the peace. That's how a protest works. If it doesn't disrupt the peace, it is not a good protest. Not the peace, but like daily life.
The point of the protest is to get noticed.
It's to disrupt things. It's to get noticed. So before you say anything, please stop and remember that it's hypocritical to say that this is a huge disruption when you support the Freedom Convoy. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm sure they'll receive. I'm sure they'll change their mind.
I've made it worse, haven't I?
You've made it so much worse.
I personally have been of the opinion that the way that Justin Trudeau handled the Freedom Convoy thing was very poor. I think most people would agree.
Yeah, I mean,
he did a bad job handling
a
it.
judicial review of their use of the
It was very
Emergencies Act.
It was
Yeah.
totally inappropriate. He refused to even speak to them. I think also inappropriate.
Yeah.
These people have a right to protest, and so did you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
let's be clear. So did you.
Nobody should ever not feel safe on campus.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a problem with the sort of false equivalency of like, okay, there's a chant that's disputed, right? Some people think it's super anti-Semitic, others don't. There's a chant that's being disputed. Therefore, let's no longer pay attention to the genocide in which, like, a UN special rapporteur has said what's happening in Gaza constitutes genocide. The International Court of Justice has retained the majority, like they will be looking into this further. And they have specifically cited instances where government officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have specifically called for war crimes and genocide and collective punishment. And, you know, they've said things like, well, there are no civilians in Palestine. And like,
What?
yeah, they've, you know, he said that. A few people
I
have
remember
said
that. I saw
You know,
those
turn
things.
it into a parking lot,
still
turn
mad.
it into
I'm still
rubble,
mad
turn
about
it into the Stone Age. And what's not getting so much attention now is that this humanitarian disaster, 1.5 million people on the brink of starvation, over 10,000 children killed, almost 40,000 people killed. And by the time we count everybody under the rubble, it's going to be 50, 60,000, plus all of the disease and all of the, like, when you don't have access to clean water, like it's a huge crisis. And to try and play this political game of, well, some people went overboard on campus in North America, therefore the entire anti-war movement is illegitimate, is a little disgusting.
There's always bad eggs, man.
Everybody, like, you go to any university protest and there's going to be an asshole who's 18 years old. 18 years old to 20 to 21 is like
fucking
peak
stupid,
asshole.
especially men.
These are like, it seems we have no problem taking isolated like, look, there was someone at one of the leaders of the Columbia resistance explicitly said, like, you're lucky I'm not out there murdering Zionists. Do not fucking say that.
Christ.
Do not say that. That is not helpful, and that is in fact an awful thing to say, and that puts people's safety at risk.
A problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are incidents like that, but you can't, for some reason, the people who are pointing out every single incident cannot turn around and condemn their side, right? So you have people who have criticized the protest at McGill, saying, well, there should no longer be any immigrants from Gaza, which is disgusting and racist. You have people who have said, well, you know, our campuses are being invaded by Iran, and this is being funded by shadowy groups, like by one person told me, George Soros is funding this. George Soros is a Holocaust survivor. How is he funding anti-Semitism? So I just, there's so much extremism right out there, and we're not pointing it out. We're pointing out every excess in the protest camp, and we're forgetting that, like, there's very, very, very real violence causing thousands of deaths on the other side, and there are members of governments cheering them on. And I think it's much more important to focus on that and try and stop the suffering. And I think, like, I don't believe that all these thousands of people on all these campuses in North America just got up one day because they hate Jewish people. I don't think no one is that hateful. Like, I mean, look, anti-Semitism is super prevalent in the West, but so is Islamophobia, and so is racism, and so is xenophobia. Yeah. But no, anti-Semitism has always occupied as long as there have been Christians, there has been virulent, like, anti-Semitism. You know this, right? Like in medieval Europe, before that. So I think we have to look at it with a little bit of remove. I do think it's extremely important that nobody feels unsafe on campus, but I think a lot of people are using this to play politics, and I find that disgusting.
It is disgusting. Don't play politics with people's lives.
No, and it is a peaceful camp. No one has done anything violent. I know that that's not necessarily the case. in all of the protests in the United States, but you've seen counter protesters at UCLA last night. Pro-Israel protesters were spraying pro-Palestinian protesters with bear mace.
Jesus.
They were shooting fireworks into the encampment. You've had provocateurs come by the McGill encampment and yell extremely offensive things about Muslims. No one person has a monopoly on shitty behavior. And I think to automatically assume that your political opponents are the only people who are awful, it's dangerous and it's murky. And what we're seeing now is like a sort of second McCarthyism, where if you support this protest movement, people have explicitly been told by potential employers, you will be denied employment at this law firm, or you will not be able to work here, or your life will be ruined simply because you want the killing to stop and you're participating in nonviolent resistance. So I know that's a big rant, but it scares the hell out of me. And I don't want people to think we're like virulent anti-Semites, because we care and we love our Jewish neighbors, and Judaism and our Jewish communities in Montreal are such a huge part of what make Montreal Montreal.
It's such a major facet of our culture, like to an astounding degree.
Astounding degree. How can, like, you cannot think of Montreal without thinking of the poetry of Leonard Cohen, and without thinking of the literature of Mordecai Richler,
even if we could take it to a very base level, without smoked meat and bagels.
Yeah, no,
like, it's a very base thing to say, but it's like, no, that's the Jewish community.
Well, how do you show people you love them? You make them food, right? And that
like the Jewish community has helped define who Montreal is.
Absolutely.
And especially this region, because Montreal in Canada is like the largest Jewish community, and then New York, and that's like our sister city, right? So
yeah, and
so it's like this region is largely defined by Jewish culture.
Yeah, and specifically the Anglo Montreal, like Anglo. It's a big percentage of Anglo Montreal, and it it is there's a kind of scene in my head when I listen to like a Leonard Cohen song or whatever, and I feel Montreal in my bones, and there's something about the tragedy and the humor and the observations that I make me smile every time, because it feels like home. So and a lot of the criticisms, that like, there have been criticisms that fall into these anti-Semitic tropes, right? And we want to make sure that
those aren't accepted.
Exactly. Like we don't want to question the loyalty of Jewish Canadian citizens. Like, are you loyal to Canada or Israel? That's like ridiculous. Don't do that to people.
Don't be anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Don't be anti-Islamic.
No, and that's a very real thing
but we're
too,
against war. Like, I'm against
the
violence being committed to the Palestinian people. Like, I'm not against Jewish people. And also it's important to note, as we noted at the beginning of this episode with Amira, being pro-Palestinian does not mean you're anti-Semitic, and also being against the violent tendencies of Israel, the country, does not say anything about the people of Judaism.
No,
like that; those are not the same. The country Israel is not the Jews.
No, and you have, and I think it also it marginalizes and minimalizes the perspective of Jewish people who are against the war. And there are many, and it marginalizes and it sidelines the efforts that a lot of these people are making to build bridges between communities. And when you see the mayor of Hampstead tweet this crazy "Make America Great Again" shit, if I were Muslim, I'd be scared, to say, we don't want you here. Like, it strikes me as a sort of political game to him. And it doesn't take much for someone to get excited and agitated, for some broken person to take that energy and do something destructive with it. Totally. And again, no one side has a monopoly on shitty behavior. And I think it's so, and I would invite anybody on either side to remember that we are dealing with human beings, and that obviously the tension is ratcheted to the max. People are dying, children are dying, and big reactions are going to happen. But we are not the worst things we've ever done, and we are not the worst things we've ever said. And I don't think anybody, and I think your beliefs as a Christian and mine as a lapsed Catholic but still sort of Christian, is that nobody's beyond redemption, and it's our duty to strive to forgive and to strive to be better people and to strive to be better neighbors. And as Mr. Rogers said, a neighbor is just someone you happen to be next to wherever you are. And it is our job to love
Mr.
our
Rogers
neighbors.
the greatest progressive of all time?
He's pretty good.
He's up there.
Freddie
if
Rogers.
If we had like a sainted group, he'd be in it. You know.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that we all could use someone
like Mr. Rogers
acknowledging our feelings and listening to us and paying attention to us.
Mr. Rogers,
you know,
why are you so beautiful?
Yeah, no, I'm like tearing up thinking about
I
it.
am too, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm being really honest.
Yeah.
We're with two beefcakes tearing up.
Two beefcakes tearing up over Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, that's what's going on right now, y'all. I hope y'all are doing good. Listen, if you're against the protests, we understand, but also treat people well. You know, if you have gotten this far, like, treat people well. If you disagree with them well. If you disagree with us well.
Try not to
Chris
make it
won't
personal.
disagree with you well.
I will try. And to some of our older listeners who might think that what's happening right now on the ground in these protest movements are sort of exceptionally bad, and we've never seen anything like this. Like, I would advise you to look back at the anti-war movement
of the 70s.
In regards to Vietnam, where you had kids on campus pledging allegiance to the Viet Cong, where Jane Fonda went to Saigon and posed next to an anti-aircraft gun manned by the Viet Cong. And like, people said things they regretted immensely. And people took extreme positions, in part, you know, because you're a teenager, but in part because you're seeing an extremely destructive war. And it just, you know, something as violent as a war is going to provoke very strong reactions. And as long as there have been protests, there have been assholes at protests. And I think,
and it'll never end.
I don't think
it'll
that
never end.
it's the, you know, it is only the domain of the left or the right or whatever.
It's neither here nor there. There
and
are
as
just
I'm seeing,
assholes who are assholes.
And as I'm seeing a lot of people comment on the, you know, take the worst example from a protest, I'm realizing that maybe, and I don't like it now, I have complicated feelings about the Ottawa convoy, because I remember, you know, you see a Nazi flag or you see some maniacs and you think, oh shit, they're all like that.
No,
everybody in the convoy is like those Nazis. Yeah. And or at least they're not doing enough to rid themselves of those people. And I still believe they didn't do enough to rid themselves of the extremists. And I think a lot of extremists took control of the Freedom Convoy. And I disagree with a lot of what the Freedom Convoy does, but it is causing me to wonder, wait, did I do the same thing as I'm accusing others of doing?
I think you did. I'm saying this on a podcast.
Sure.
I think most leftists did. And I think that most, maybe more mildly conservative people who were part of the Freedom Convoy, who are like not extremists at all,
yeah,
I think they didn't even realize. Because I think there was too much suppression of, or like too much, the information that was presented to them is so pro this thing that like it won't criticize the thing. But like,
and it's another extreme situation, right? We've never been in a lockdown until COVID-19.
No,
not everyone's going to react to that the same way. Some people took it hard, and I get it. You know, I mean, it was lonely and scary,
it was scary.
It felt like, and the government messaging was super inconsistent on the provincial and federal level. So I get it.
I just think that we, you know, this is not about at all the encampments, but I think we did distort it some.
Totally.
And I think it was mishandled on every front.
Yeah.
And it further.
The cops did a terrible job.
Cops did a terrible job, and also it was funded by like United States people who had malicious intent. But I think that most of the regular people who were there did not have malicious intent.
No.
And I think I really wish that that hadn't divided us so much further.
Yeah.
Because I think Canada was actually doing all right. I think that was like the number one biggest thing that's happened in Canada to divide the country, the convoys.
In recent history.
Yeah. It's
and
really,
now
it's
and
tragic,
now I think
tragic,
that was
dude.
the number one thing, and now and here's the other thing that's kind of crazy is that we're seeing like Twitter and social media, and even these protests are not reality. They're like, I mean, the protests are reality. They're really happening.
They're happening, and so did the convoys.
I mean, most Canadians are not that involved in this. And they're not paying that close attention because they have busy lives, because it's very sad. It's very complicated. They don't want to say the wrong thing, and I get it. But there is consensus. There is consensus on, like, I believe it's 80% of, or either 3/4 or 80% of Canadians believe in, like, are okay with these protests on campuses.
Yeah.
And I believe it's something like, there was a poll in November, and this is before the hospital massacres. This is before the mass graves. This is before a lot, the aid truck massacres where people were gunned down trying to get food in Gaza. Before all of that, 77% of Quebecers, or of Canadians polled, wanted to see a ceasefire immediately. So there is political consensus on this.
Similar in the States.
Yeah,
it's one of those things with the government where they have like they have such a vested political interest in Israel having power.
And it's not a Jewish thing.
It's a geopolitical thing.
It is 100%. We have a military alliance
It's a
in a region of the world where
Yep.
we want to have a footprint, and we want to have a foothold.
It has nothing to do with
And we will look the other way on a lot of human rights abuses, as the West has done with so many other governments.
It's colonialization in a different modern form.
And of course, it's weird that, like, it's happening to people who themselves were the victims of genocide and the survivors of the Holocaust.
Very strange. It's very strange.
It is, of course, super strange. But it speaks to the fact that, like, deep down inside, human beings are human beings.
Yeah.
In all we're kind of all the same in the worst ways and in the best ways.
Yeah.
And that is both extremely comforting and terrifying.
Yeah.
This is super simplistic, and so many of the people who follow this conflict closely will probably listen to the podcast and say, these guys are fucking idiots. They don't know what they're talking about, on both sides.
Yeah.
Because it's such a simplistic message. Give peace a chance. But God damn it, give peace a chance.
Give peace a chance, y'all. This is the Rover. Please support us. therover.ca/support-us. Sign up for the free newsletter. Sign up for the not free newsletter. Give us money. Like this. Subscribe to this. Subscribe to YouTube, because you know what? It's growing.
It is.
And we would like to continue growing. First 1,000 is the hardest bunch. Let's keep going, guys. So if you liked this, if you want to see more of this, please subscribe, like, share, do everything. We are very in need of more support.
And we're in it for the long haul.
We are in it for the long haul. I mean, you're stuck with us. If you hate us,
well,
send me a message on Instagram. It'll probably be filtered by Instagram. Send him a message on Twitter.
It won't be filtered.
It will not be filtered.
Definitely respond in the most
don't
alarmingly
do it.
violent
Don't do it,
way.
Chris.
No, I won't.
But seriously,
I'm trying to be more
send
chill.
us DMs. Go downstairs. Go downstairs on the description. You can send us emails. You can send us whatever you want. Okay, like we're here. We're listening. If you have questions you want us to talk about, send them. We are interested in growing this and making it into something more than just us talking at you. 2 beefcakes on a podcast. The Rover. Be well. Goodbye.
Thank you.